Today we're interviewing John Retsas, owner and winemaker from First Drop Wines. I'm Jason.
And I'm Trent, and we're here on an unfiltered, unapologetically unprofessional wine journey. And we have a saying here.
Our saying is drink more, try more, learn more. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. John, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you spending the time to have a chat with us on this day.
Hey guys, yeah, good morning. Nice to talk.
Absolutely. We're keen to learn more about yourself and your wine journey and First Drop Wines. And we've got a great selection of wines that we're going to go through today. But before we do that, we do want to ask you a few icebreaker questions just to get to know you.
Okay, John. So first one up is there a most memorable wine that you've had in the past?
I remember when I was sort of starting off in my wine career, I had a very swanky restaurant. And probably, I don't know, early days, sort of in the early 90s, and ordered a bottle of 1952 Chateau Ranello Claret. It's basically, as I found out, not long after, it was basically Cabernet Sauvignon from McLaren Vale and the Goulburn Valley. It was a sensational wine, and it was sort of punctuated by its elegance and its amazing flavours and its longevity. It was a 52, 1952, whatever, 51 or 52, but it was just had so much life and so much energy and so much tension that sort of said, well, we could make great wine in this country and great wine that ages as well. So why not take this journey and see if we can do this?
Sounds like a great memory and a great spark as well for your wine journey. So is there also still a wine that you haven't had the chance to try yet, but you still want to try?
Look, I've been in the wine industry for some time now, so I've been lucky enough to taste a lot of wines, and a lot of wines from producers not only around Australia but globally. Sure, there's always something that icon wine where the great vintages, maybe, I don't know, some Burgundies or great vintages of some older Bordeaux's, but they're sort of very few and far between. I've been lucky enough to taste a lot of the great Australian wine, and I still think that some of the greats from this country are just as good as anything from anywhere else in the world. We shouldn't be apologetic or make any apologies for making great Australian wine. And Shiraz, Cabernet, Chardonnay from this country is as good as anything.
Have you seen that growth in Australian wine from where it was when you started to where it is now?
I've seen the growth in consumption over the journey. I've seen the growth in diversity. New plantings in regions where potentially they were growing, just 3 or 4 or 5 varieties. Expand rapidly into Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, grape varieties. So I've seen it emerge over the years where I started in the business in 1996, and it's always been pretty exciting right the way through. But what we do today is pretty. I think we've got as much diversity in Australia, from the west to the east, than any other country.
Awesome. Next one up, favorite grape varietal.
I love Shiraz and Cabernet. Call me old fashioned. I'm a little bit crazy on Nebbiolo, and I think Nebbiolo from Adelaide Hills and parts of Victoria is really exciting. Quite a few different grape varieties at First Drop, and to say that I've got a favourite is kind of
picking your favourite child.
Yeah,
it's like saying who's your favourite child. It just but again, I think the great varieties from Australia, and the Barossa, Shiraz, and Grenache, and I love Cabernet from cooler, maritime affected places like McLaren Vale, and definitely there's great Cabernet out of the Coonawarra. So it'd be great to see Cabernet make a commercial comeback again. For whatever reason, it's a bit on the not as popular to a certain degree. That'd be great for consumers to get back to drinking great cabs.
Yeah.
There's a cool emergence with Grenache at the moment, which is sensational. The style of Grenache has evolved a lot since I started in the business. In the 90s, Grenache was made in a big, rich, heavy style, and now these days it's made in a bit more ethereal, lighter, brighter style. So that's also speaks of winemakers understanding the variety better, but also understanding, that food and wine are a thing, and we've got to make wine that suits our climate, but also suits what we eat.
Mm.
So yeah, it's we're always evolving. It's an evolution, not a revolution, as I like to say. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, the industry changes all the time, and the great thing about making wine in Australia, we're not restrained by varieties in certain regions, the irrigation and non-irrigation and blending. We can do whatever we like. I think that opens up the hemisphere for making some amazing wines.
Definitely. You touched on a point there around food and wine, and that's my next question around, are there any kind of unique wine pairings, food and wine pairings that you've come across that you want to share with us?
I'll drink, a chilled Grenache with seafood. I'll have a Cabernet with, lighter meats. I think as long as the wine is light and bright enough to enjoy with anything, go for it. I don't have a sort of style. Look, it's Shiraz. You got to drink it with steak, or
Yeah.
it's Montepulciano. You've got to have it with bistecca fiorentina.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. I think, and most consumers don't care about that. As long as the wine is delicious and the food is delicious, go crazy.
Sounds good. Next one. So you started your journey, you said, in 1996. So it's about 28 years now. Are there any kind of big learnings that you've had through that time that you could also share with us?
Yeah, it's been the Australian wine industry has been through quite a few ups and downs, mainly around our sort of export markets. I think we were quite popular in the 90s in the UK, and then we sort of became very popular as an industry in the US, and then became sort of a bit of a juggernaut as an industry in Asia and China. But what we've seen over the journey is a constant change, whether it's consumer behaviour or it's political. So yeah, there's been many peaks and troughs. Speaks to me of the fact that that our wines are so good, and extremely well priced. For the quality. That we're kind of a pretty resilient industry, and we can battle through most peaks and troughs. So that's my learning. It's what you see today isn't necessarily what you'll see in a few years' time. But what is overwhelmingly consistent for me is the diversity and the quality of Australian wine is as good as anything in the world. So there wouldn't be too many other countries that have so many great grain regions and make great wines throughout a mass which is kind of like the size of Europe. So we are very blessed here with great soils, great climate, and great people in the industry that make amazing wines.
Awesome. That's the questions.
That's all of the icebreaker questions. Thanks, John. While listening in, I can really get the passion you have for Australian wines. You're not just talking about first drop, but it really shines through the pride you have around what we have in this country, which is great. We kind of want to expand on a few of the other topics that were discussed there around your wine journey, and you did say 1996 was a clear year for you in terms of starting that, but my understanding is your interest in wine started off very early, very young. Are you able to describe what was it, the moments that got you interested into wine and really kicked off your journey?
I grew up in the country in South Australia, a fishing town called Ceduna, fishing agri town. The old man migrated from Greece in 1950 something, and went to Ceduna to fish as a professional fisherman. And I was born out there about 1968. In those days, there was no online wine sales, no big box retailers. So you bought wine from the local sort of pub, and the selection out in the country, 50 odd years ago wasn't amazing. So we decided, my father decided it was a great idea to make his own wine. So we would come to Adelaide and buy grapes, typically, the cheapest red grape you could buy, which is in those days, Grenache or Bastardo, or God knows what it was. And we'd make wine at home. So I was a 8, 9 year old kid jumping on grapes and thought it was amazing and getting stung by bees. And yeah, so we fermented these wines in all sorts of vessels. Of course, we weren't set up for winemaking. So we would drink wine at home, with our meals, and we'd get a little glass of wine and maybe dilute it with water, and so we drank wine at home on for lunch and or dinner, most days, and on occasion, I'd get a little drip of wine, and it kind of resonated with me that it was quite a special thing, because this thing's rare. You go to a lot of trouble making it, and it was a special beverage. So I held this sort of really, really, how do I say it? Really sort of high position in my mindset of being a very special drink. So that's how it all started. So, and then holidays to Greece, where my grandfather made wine as well, and help, and he had vineyards. So you'd help in the vintage there, and he'd have all the equipment, so he would make wine, and he'd make 4,000 or 5,000 liters and sell some to the locals, trade some, and it was just part of growing up every day. I didn't really understand that it was an industry or a business. It was something that we did every year, and it kind of just morphed from being an 8-year-old kid jumping on grapes to a 50-year-old kid jumping on grapes.
It's a pretty fun experience. I could imagine at 8 years old, stomping on grapes would be a great memory. Something quite fun. You touched on at 8 years old. That was kind of the trigger point that kicked it all off. Between now and then, are you able to summarize what's been your wine journey? Where have you worked? Countries you visited, etc. What's happened between now to this point? Between 8 years old and getting to this point.
It's it's a long journey. So 8 years old, wine was part of everyday life. Went to uni, fast track. Went to uni, hated uni. I'd studied economics and accountancy, and quickly after a year, thought that this is not for me, much to the disgust of my family and friends and parents. So dropped out and started working in hospitality. And after a year or so, sort of in charge of wine buying, and you taste a lot of wine, and it was pretty cool. Visited lots of wine regions as a result, and then worked in distribution, and started selling wine around Australia, in Adelaide and South Australia, then Australia, and got a job at a winery. One of my principals gave me a job running his winery, and totally loved that, and got to travel around the world. But in those days, it was mainly our traditional core markets like the US and the UK. And from there, started working with some really, really good winemakers, well distinguished winemakers, and started making wine. So in those early days, I ran a winery in the Adelaide Hills called Chain of Ponds in the 90s, and we made great Chardonnay and great Cabernet. Worked with the late great Neville Falkenberg when he was helping develop the Yatana project for Penfolds, and fell in love with Adelaide Hills Chardonnay. Worked a vintage in Sicily, which I loved. I love Sicily. I love the food. I love the people. That was a real eye opener. Came back and joined St. Hallett when they were just taken over by a corporate sort of takeover that was Banksia / Lion Nathan.
Mm.
That came Petaluma and Tatachilla and Mitchelton. So that automatically exposed me to lots of different wineries at once from lots of different regions in Australia. Left Lion after 5 years and joined a small family winery in the Barossa in Lyndoch, and helped develop their brand and their wines. Took them from not many cases to quite a few cases. So grew that business. But all in the meantime, in 2004, I set up First Drop Wines and was sort of making wine in the shed and back of a mate's house, and sort of slowly was growing the First Drop brand, organically. And then in 2010, I joined First Drop full time. And here we are now, 14 years later, making about 30,000 cases of wine every year and selling to about 20 countries. Good amount of mother's milk goes around Australia and the world, just kind of our fighting
Yep.
brand. And then there's a whole swag of Italian grape varieties, Spanish, Portuguese grape varieties, maritime affected Cabernet, or maritime influenced Cabernet, not affected. It's been a pretty exciting ride. And as I said earlier, the Australian wine industry is nothing but, exciting for me. It's, we've got some great young winemakers that are always emerging and stamping their footprint on wine, and that's really cool because in 2004 we were those guys, we were those young guns that were going a bit crazy, making Arneis and Nebbiolo and Barbera and Touriga, grape varieties that we'd never really knew too much about in those days. So in 2007 we won the inaugural Young Gun of Wine, which is pretty cool, and we continue to support and watch that award evolve over time, and it's really cool.
So you're at First Drop full time. The name First Drop, where did that come from?
Yeah, a bit of a cricket tragic. So I always thought it was a cool name for wine. And I guess also, it's like anything, the first crush and the first press is, or that free run is kind of like the highest quality for me. So it's got lots of meanings. It speaks of purity. It speaks of, quality, and it's cool. I just thought it was a cool name.
If we think about First Drop wines, when I look at it and the way it's positioned, I really feel like you've set out to establish a unique identity, something approachable, something that brings out your personalities, and you can see that with every single different label within your wines. What is it that you are looking to achieve, and how are you positioning First Drop wines?
I think you just need to be true to yourself. There's fashion that comes and goes, and there's all sorts of different fashion in not only in wine, but in obviously clothing and motor vehicles and whatnot. Popular culture evolves very quickly. So for me, it was important that First Drop spoke of who we are and what we are. And I've always enjoyed, the fun of wine and the story of wine, in that that we can make great wine in this country and tell a cool story and not be like the rest of the world, where you swan around at wine shows with double-breasted suits. And no, we're not. Australians aren't those people. We are. We're larrikins. We're down to earth. We're typically if it passed the pub test, well, that's good enough. So that was my philosophy for First Drop, is to be true to yourself and true to what you want to make. And at the end of the day, we just want to make great drinks that people enjoy. So that's the philosophy of First Drop.
And then we see that also plastered across Cellar as well, home of the brave, that kind of talks to being brave in the new varietals, brave also in terms of being true to yourself as well, and being unwavering in terms of the intent.
Absolutely. So yeah, the Barossa, the Cellar is based in the Barossa, even though we make wines from the Barossa, Adelaide Hills and McLaren Vale. We based in the old Penfolds winery in Uriupta. Penfolds moved out some years ago, and we moved in about 2010. We don't occupy the whole site, thankfully, but we occupy a little corner where we can make. We recycled, an old building for our cellar door, and we've recycled an old winery shed for our winery, and similarly with our warehouse. It's an old warehouse.
I guess you said that you're traditionalist. You love your Shiraz and Cabernet, but you also mentioned that you kind of, as that kind of young winemaker, started to do those Italian varieties around Arneis, Montepulciano, Nebbiolo, etc. Is that the way you're kind of more progressing? Is one going to take over the other, or are you still going to look at that kind of broad range around still the Shiraz, Cabernet, Grenaches, and also the Italian varietals as well?
I think Australian wine globally is viewed as, make great Shiraz and Cat, and to a lesser degree Grenache. I mean, we do make great Grenache, but the perception is that we're a Shiraz Cabernet growing nation. So I think that's where we'll continue to head, and that's where the business as an industry will probably continue to head. And it is very difficult to sell, say, Arneis to Italians or to markets that understand that all of these Italian grape varieties are probably going to be sourced from Italy. So as a business, I think we'll continue to make the best wines we can, but we'll probably be famous for the core varieties of Shiraz and Cabernet, and Chardonnay, and all the other Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, who knows, maybe one day Greek varieties will be the baubles on the Christmas tree, which kind of keeps us interesting and cool. I think as an industry and as a business, we'll still be stuck to those core, 3 or 4 varieties. And if you look at the numbers of what's made and sold and exported, they're all based around, the reality is it's based around 3 or 4 varieties, and that's it.
I was going to touch on a point there around you're being Greek and then you went to Sicily and you're doing all these Italian varietals. So the Greek varietals, I saw Jim Barry doing Astirico and also, other Greek varietals as well. Is that something that you're going to start to look at?
I think, it'll be a great story for me to be able to make some Greek grape varieties. Greece is a country that's not been making wine for very long, about 5,000 years. So, and over that time, they've developed, an industry which is not very well. The quality isn't as appreciated as it should be. The wines of Greece are amazing, and the grape varietals that they can grow there in such a hot, arid country, I think would do quite well here. So there's a Siltico, which is obviously quite famous. It's based in Santorini, and Santorini is a famous tourist attraction, and blah blah blah.
I think Mavro as well is a big one.
Great. And there's some in Australia, but I don't think the producer who has it is allowing anyone else to take his cuttings. There's Xinomavro, which is very, very close to Nebbiolo in terms of flavour, in terms of its structure, in terms of acid and tannin. That's pretty cool. There's also, really light, bright, aromatic Moscato, which I personally love. And about 2,500 other grape varieties that we've never heard of that are unique to their place. So it'll be really cool to be able to play with some of those. And I think there's moves in place now to have some of those grape varieties go through the CSIRO process. And hopefully we can get our hands on them soon. But I'd love to make 1 or 2 Greek grape varieties for sure.
Sounds cool. Do you think the Australian palate is evolving and changing to really appreciate more of these kind of alternative varieties?
Absolutely. We're seeing, more and more imported wines from Europe in particular. And that, whilst it's be great to drink more Australian wine, what it does is an icebreaker for consumers to drink, Barbera or Sangiovese or whatever, and then they'll say, consumers say, why don't I try a Barbera from Australia or a Sangiovese from Australia or a Pinot Grigio from Australia? Quite often, the Australian version is as good as, if not better in some cases, than the imported version.
Definitely. And also what it accentuates as well, you can say the same grape variety, but from different areas of the world and see that different expression of the land come through.
100%. So, as consumers in Australia, we're open to trying different wines from different regions around the world. Very very different though if you go to, say, I don't know, Italy or France, where they'll just drink Italian wine. Most consumers there are not open to discovery, but as Australians, we are. We don't care. So that's really cool, and that's what allows us to develop our styles here.
And something I find about Australian culture, what we do is we kind of downplay some great achievements. And the way you were talking there, John, you were saying, you've just been on an ad hoc journey, but you've done really well, and it's recognized internationally. If we look at what First Drop has won, so the Cream Shiraz, 98 points with James Suckling, Mother's Milk Shiraz, only Aussie wine in Wine Spectator top 100 for 2 years in a row, including last year. So for an ad hoc journey, well done. You've done a great job. And so that's probably a good segue into the tastings. So we talked about the Shiraz from First Drop, but we're fortunate to try quite a few of the alternate, the Italian varieties, which we've got here. So we might jump into the tasting as we show the wine on the camera. So this is our Prosecco.
Prosecco, yeah. So again, we love the artwork, and I guess while we kind of take a sip of this one, we can also, I just want to ask you the question around the artwork, the names of the wine. Where does that come from? Who does it? Is there a rationale, reasoning behind each of them?
The rationale is, as a broad comment, is wine, like people, has its own personality. And for us, we make wine to be enjoyed without too much fuss. So we tell a story of the wine, and each wine has its own stage name. So the Prosecco is called Following the Sun. And I've been lucky to travel around selling wine, and it's always a great place wherever you are when the sun's out, and it's the perfect lifestyle to follow this. So Prosecco is northern. Oh, it's made throughout Italy, but typically comes from northern Italy. Secco means dry. Somewhere along the line, that memo
Got lost.
So there's a lot of Prosecco around from all over that is not so dry. So this is bone dry, made from Glenna fruit from South Australia. It's not Adelaide Hills. It's grown out in the Riverina area. But we pick it early at very low bome, bring it to the winery, ferment it till it's bone dry, and carbonate it and bottle it fresh. So this is the 2023 vintage, Following the Sun. It kind of speaks of mermaids, beaches. It's a great aperitivo. It's nice and mouth puckering, dry, and it's got some beautiful Nashi pears and green apples. I personally love this wine. It's lots of fun.
Yeah, you mentioned bone dry. It's definitely that, and maybe the mermaids is kind of like a tie into maybe having some seafood as well.
100% great seafood. I mean, who doesn't like mermaids? That's
the next one. So we have Endless Summer.
Yeah, so this speaks of my fascination with summer and white wine. Not that you can't drink red wine during the summer, but it's a pretty good time to drink white wine and get your Pinot Grigio nice and cold. And again, you can have it as an aperitif with as an entree, great with seafood, but also just great on its own. Drunk with friends overlooking the beach.
Is this from Adelaide Hills? Is it? Or?
There's a vineyard in Brook in the northern hills and a vineyard in Kaipo in the southern hills. With light and bright when there's lots of freshness. They're harvested at night, brought into the winery, and little free run. The first drops are fermented separately to the pressings, and after a short fermentation, really cool fermentation, it's bottled. So this is 2023 vintage, which is current release, and it speaks of freshness. There's no smoke or mirrors in terms of winemaking. It's just all about purity of fruit. It's a really, really refreshing, easy to drink Pinot Grigio, which has some flavour. And some varietal characteristic, being free run juice, so it's not diluted by its pressings or masked by its pressing. It's all about purity of fruit.
And acid on that is gorgeous as well, I find, on that Pinot Grigio.
I think you mentioned a food pairing with it. What do you typically recommend with this Pinot Grigio?
I was at a Chinese restaurant 2 nights ago, and had it with Chinese food. Those light steamed, delicate sauces. It's great on its own as an aperitivo, just to drink, with a fruit, cheese, and whatever. But it's fantastic with lighter foods. So obviously seafood, Japanese cuisine, light Chinese cuisine, fantastic.
Go well with sushi, I reckon.
I think the lighter the wine, lighter the food, irrespective of the colour of the wine. It's just it's got a light, bright expression of, say, I don't know, Touriga Nacional or Grenache. You can drink those red varietals with light lighter expressions of cuisine.
Yeah, again, I love the artwork. Do you have any input into that in terms of the creative?
100% the creative input is mine. So we package the wines to suit the style and tell the story that we want to tell about the wine. And it's all, I'll work with different designers. So this is a designer based in France, local Adelaide lad who's moved to France, and so he's both of us actually. Moved to France and is designing over there, doing really well over there. We've worked with probably a half a dozen designers over the years, maybe more. So it's important not to have a design house style for us. It's important to keep it fresh, and the fact that they're not all the same. They don't have that house style is the anti-brand. It's kind of cool. It's thumbing your finger to, or your nose to those ones that want to make sure everything looks the same, and which is kind of boring.
I think it makes an impact though. For me, like, you drink with your eyes, and when I drinking the Pinot Grigio and look at it, I see that kind of association. You just feel more relaxed, summery. So I like the idea. I love the idea.
So we've probably got the next wine. What's
Arneis.
Was this the first wine that First Drop produced?
Yeah, 2004 Arneis. Arneis is a northern Italian grape variety, famous in the Piemonte region, and worked in Piemonte over the years, and fell in love with Arneis and Nebbiolo and Barbera. So this is the 2022 vintage of Arneis from a vineyard in Hursbrook in the Adelaide Hills. So the vineyard is now 5 years old. Again, we harvest this at night and bring the fruit into the winery and gently press it. But this one sits on its lees, its fine lees, for about 2 months, regular weekly stirring just to build up the texture. Arneis for me it's quite a pithy, lemony, limey expression of a white grape variety. 2 months in cool fermentation and then bottled fresh. So fantastic with obviously seafood, but great with like light pasta dishes with butter and cream. The Piemontese there, like to cook with creams and butters.
Yeah.
Burnt butter.
Yeah.
Sage. Fantastic with Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese, seafood. It's just an all rounder. It's a perfect, and it's a great food wine.
I love that. I love the lees on it, that effect on it, that kind of complexity it can add to it.
I think it's really important. It adds another layer to it, and adds another texture on the palate. It's a fantastic wine to have with food.
It is delicious. You mentioned those kind of food pairings, and the one that kind of came to my mind was just the Piemontese type of food, which is like the tagliatelle with a butter, sage, and a bit of white truffle on top. We're kind of like, go with this one beautifully.
I'm salivating. Yeah, so yeah, that's a classic Piemontese. And shock horror, the local Piemontese don't drink Barolo every day. They drink, Arneis, and Barbera, and Dolcetto, and they drink, a lot softer styles and lots of whites.
Why was the Arneis the first choice in terms of wines that First Drop would produce?
In the first vintage we made Shiraz as well, which is mother's milk. But obviously with Shiraz you've got to mature it for a certain time in oak. So whereas the Arneis and the Albarino was sort of the first two whites that we released because they were ready first from a winemaking perspective.
Yeah.
And it was kind of crazy, running around trying to sell Arneis to restaurants. No one had heard of it. And distributors didn't know what the bloody hell we were talking about. So it was interesting first few years. But yeah, it was also about being brave and not conforming and making, the 3 or 4 grape varieties that you get everywhere, which are great. They're fantastic. Don't get me wrong. We make those wines. It was just part of being brave and being different. So showing consumers and the trade and press that we can make, alternative and emerging grape varieties in this country. And there is another story that hadn't been told back in 2004, and has been communicated ever since. And I think a lot of producers done really well with the alternative grape varieties, and evolved the style to over time to make better wine.
And to me, you've really pushed to get the alternate varieties in. What was it that you were experiencing and seeing at that time, which said, "Hold on, we've got to open up the palate a bit, try something new"? Because to me, I feel like that's a key thing that First Drop has done in terms of opening up the different varieties to try. What did you see at that time?
I think through travel and through spending time in Italy, Greece, and, around the world, we drank a lot of different grape we hadn't seen in this country. Very little was imported, hardly any was made, and I just felt as if we could make those wines here as well as anywhere else.
Yeah.
And also be different. I mean, why not be different, and why not give consumers the opportunity to taste something that's different?
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So
We've got the reds now here.
the Moderno Barbera. So from the 2022 vintage, Moderno means loosely modern in Italian, and this is stylistically where we're heading. There's lots of traditional manufacturers of Barbera and Nebbiolo in say Piemonte, where there's a bit of not an argument, but there's conversation around what style is the style. So for me, Barbera is grown on a vineyard in the Adelaide Hills in Kersbrook. We pick it early. We pick it about 13 and a half ish, I may 13.5/14, and bring it into the winery where it spends about 6 or 7 days on skins on a cold soak, and a little bit of working, not much, and then it's pressed off into large format French barrels, like 500 litre puncheons, and the puncheons are all seasoned. There's no new oak, and it only sees about 6 months in oak. So it's bottled in the year of vintage to retain its freshness. So Barbera speaks of blue fruits, lavenders, some nice high tone aromatics. It's got some reasonable palate weight, so it's got quite a broad palate. It's the ultimate pizza wine for me, Barbera. It's great with antipasto. Think salty anchovies and olives and cheese. Great with pasta, of course.
Has that kind of olive type of feel to it, and for me, it feels so juicy and plump and rounded, and you forget how beautiful and perfumed it is as well. I think we're always trying to go for the Nebbiolos around, but then we forget about Barbera and how great it is.
One of the most drinkable Italian varieties, I think, Barbera, and it's grown all over Italy for that reason. It's one of those all rounders, and we're seeing more and more Barbera imported into Australia and more Barbera made here. Some of the better Barberas I've had are made locally. So we've done well with this grape variety in Australia. It's doing quite well. You can grow it, successfully in a diverse, set of mesoclimates, and we grow out in the Adelaide Hills because just feel that little bit cooler sort of setting does it seems to retain its freshness and its natural acidity.
Yeah, a bit more lifted.
100%. And it's great with the aromatics.
The palate weight really stands out to me. Like, this is a delicious wine, but that feel, palate weight, is there a way to influence that, or is that just naturally the style of Barbera?
I think Barbera is made in lots of different styles. It's made as lighter style and a sort of richer style. This just speaks of its place. This vineyard is cooler, but it's not freezing cold. It's not like a Piccadilly side. It's in the northern Adelaide Hills, where it's slightly warmer. So we're getting some nice ripeness and long, slow ripeness. So it builds that broader palate. It speaks of its place, absolutely.
I know that for first drop that I believe it's the case now as well, that none of your grapes are estate grown. It's all from growers around the area. Is that always a tough ask in terms of what you're trying to do as a wine and a wine style with the growers?
It's not easy. It's definitely has its challenges, but it gives us the flexibility to be able to grow grapes from, as far north of the Barossa Ebenezer and as far south as McLaren Vale and Blue Springs. So it gives us a broad spectrum of mesoclimates, of soils, and we work with growers. We try to work with growers that understand their farms and understand viticulture, and also understand the style that we're looking for. So we've got growers in the Barossa that we're looking for a fresher, juicier expression of Shiraz, and they'll grow that style for us. And we're looking for growers in the Barossa that we're looking for more concentration and structure, like for a fat of the land wine, which needs lower yield. So it whilst it has its challenges, it also gives us great flexibility to be able to work with a broad spectrum of growers and viticulturists that we're not trying to make Grange Hermitage every day. We're looking to make a wine beverage that speaks of its place, speaks of its variety, and is true to the style that we're looking for. And with that, we have to accept the fact that we can't grow it all ourselves. That we have to work as a team and have to work with growers that understand their farms and understand their skill set and deliver us the grapes that we want to make.
And so we'll probably jump into the next one then. What's
Looks like a Ferrari style, Forza Ferrari or something like that. But
Forza, which is the force.
yeah,
And like a lot of Nebbiolo, there's a little bit of a sort of ethereal black hole there. This is actually one of my favourite labels. It's quite understated, but also the colour bright fluoro yellow, which is kind of bright. And Nebbiolo is one of my favourite grape varieties. We spent some time in Piemonte and lots of Nebbiolo and Rollo and Barbaresco. And what punctuates this grape variety for me is its ability to age. And it doesn't matter if the vintage is a great classic or not. Time heals all wounds with Nebbiolo. So I've been lucky enough to drink Nebbiolo over there that's 50 and 60 years old, and it's just an amazing drink.
What's the vintage of this one? 2014.
2014.
So it's been 3 years in large format botti, 1,000-litre botti, and then it matured in the cellar until its release. So this is a pretty cool program where we normally release these wines with 8 or 9 years, or 10 years, depending on how the cycle goes on them and of age on them. So this is 2010. I think it's drinking perfectly. It speaks of dried herbs, that sort of tar and roses.
Love that.
The finish is really good and it's still going.
And the thing that I noticed with this one, it feels like it's more drinkable than some of the other Nebbiolos you had. Like the tannins isn't as astringent and big. It's kind of there. It's kind of matches with the juiciness of the fruit, and it still has the perfumes around the aromas they mentioned around the tar and roses as well. So again, another gorgeous, easy drinking wine that's just great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's as I said, time is very kind to Nebbiolo. Time softens the tannins in the bottle, and whilst there's some structure there and some tannin there, they're pretty soft and very easy to enjoy. So it's also bucco, stewed, rich sort of like stewed Shanghainese pork, belly. It's just great with. I think it's great with fatty food. Peking duck.
Yes.
Throw the Pinot away and just bring a Nebbiolo in for Peking duck. I reckon it's not that I don't get me wrong. I love Pinot, but it's another alternative for Peking duck.
But you said this is 2014. Is this current release?
Current release, yeah. So I'm just about to release in a few months, in the cooler months, a 2010 Nebbiolo that we've sort of held back and thought it was pretty cool as a reserve style. So
Wow.
yeah, that's going to be like 14 years on release. So it's going to be pretty crazy. Tiny amounts made, but yeah, it's kind of cool to be able to tell that story. And again, um, over the years in Australia, there's been some really good progress made with Nebbiolo from the Adelaide Hills, parts of Victoria, that are growing and making some nice Nebbiolos.
Have you had any Nebbiolo from Adelaide Hills apart from this one? I don't think I have.
I know in Victoria they're doing a lot, like in the Yarra.
Yeah, but this stands out. This is fantastic.
Let's wrap up with the last wine that we have, the Montepulciano.
Yeah, Montepulciano from Adelaide Hills. This is classic 2018 vintage. It's Minchia Montepulciano. So Minchia, having worked in Sicily, every second word in the winery was Minchia this, Minchia that. So I came back and tasted the wine, and I said, "Oh, Minchia, this is good." So wrote that name on the barrel in chalk, and that was the stage name for the wine. So
What's Minchia mean?
I don't know.
What does Minchia mean?
it's got, as the label says, it's got ambiguous meanings. But for this exercise, it means wow.
Right.
This, Minchia that.
Got it.
But it can also be something that's pretty rude as well. But it's not intended to do that. Just means wow, Minchia Montepulciano.
Got it.
So it's planted in the Adelaide Hills on a really bony site. Very little topsoil and lots of limestone and shale. So that naturally devigors the vines and creates a fruit structure, fruit profile of great concentration and minerality. So this vineyard throws about a ton to the acre, sometimes sort of 700 kilos in a warmer year. 2018 is a classic vintage, so about a ton to the acre, rich, concentrated expression of Montepulciano is aged in French oak. And I think from 18, it was about 18 to 20 months in French oak, about 20 or 30% new, just to create some architecture around the fruit. And then it's matured in the cellar on release. So this has been in the market for about, I don't know, it's been released for about 6 months. So it's a more reserva style of Montepulciano. So it's concentrated, it's richer, it's denser. It's got some nice fruit and some beautiful structure.
I think you hit it, right on the head there in terms of the structure, that concentration. That's another gorgeous wine.
Yeah.
that I'm quite surprised with. It's that kind of creaminess, that kind of body, the concentration. It's, I'm actually really surprised. What does the label actually mean, though? You have the kind of like the black with the zip coming down and the color kind of protruding to come out. Is that like it's hiding the beauty and the artwork underneath or something like that?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool label. So this is, it is that. It's like undo the zipper and have a look inside. And the zipper is shaped like a wine glass, and then there's some pretty cool sort of 1950s artwork underneath. Look, all the labels tell a story of the wine, and that's 100% that wine and that label sort of work really well. So it's got ambiguous meaning, boys. I'll let you.
I'm getting that. Yep.
But it's like everything we do at First Drop. It's all about having fun. It's not about offending people or whatever. It's just if you go to Italy, every second word is Minchia this, Minchia that, which means wow. But it can mean
something else.
I'll Google that later and find out.
Yeah, undo the zipper and then wow. But you're right. Like in tasting these wines, we were talking about earlier, choosing your favorite child. You're making it really difficult, John. These are all great. So thanks for sharing that. I think if we think about your journey in itself, and we can only see snippets of it. We can see 10 or 14 years ago, you racing the V8 supercars, going to the rifle range, and then now the videos around cooking and your family and your kids, obviously growing up. You've gone through a bit of a journey at this stage. What's ahead for First Drop Wines? Anything coming up where it's going to kind of change the landscape of things?
I'd like to think that we continue to evolve and be exciting and offer a little bit of fun and freshness to the industry, which let's face it, we need some excitement in all industries and somebody to disrupt, but also to improve. And by all means, we're not the only winery that is doing that. But for me, it's an important to that we could continue on that journey, that first drop journey of having some fun and creating wines that people want to drink. We're Australian. We like to have, we're relaxed. We've got relaxed lifestyles. We've got huge diversity in cuisine, from migration, into this country from the post-war to today. And why not take advantage of that? Why not make wines that people want to drink with all sorts of cuisine, from Middle Eastern to European to traditional English to Asian to whatever. So the world is changing and evolving, and I think First Drop should continue to do that. And we want to be one of those wineries that people say, oh yeah, they're pretty cool, they make good wine, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that comes through. I think John, you're a pretty cool guy. I think it comes through with the wine itself. It's got this personality, and they're all quite drinkable. We're probably at the tail end of the interview. Trent, did you have any other last questions?
I can probably be honest. I've been pleasantly surprised in terms of the flight. I think the highlights for me have been the Arneis, and also the Nebbiolo has been the real highlights for me. And I think, for First Drop, it's a great drop. So
very nice. John, did you have any final words for our viewers and listeners out there?
Thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry if I bored you, but it's nice to talk to you guys, and well done for the platform, and well done for raising the bar and exposing some cool Australian producers. We need more positive and innovation and good vibes in what we do, and you guys definitely do that. And thank you to your audience. I think you guys are doing great stuff. Well done.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for spending the time with us and taking us through the wines. If I look at a bit of the commentary that you put out there, First Drop Wines, they're meant to be enjoyed and admired is kind of a consistent theme and quote that comes through. And through this tasting, I completely agree. These are very drinkable, very enjoyable right now.
Quaffable, I think.
Quaffable. I've never heard that. But fantastic. For all of our listeners and viewers, definitely try the First Drop Wines. John, once again, thank you so much. And as we like to say here, drink more, try more, learn more. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.